Welcome to Azur Lane Meta. Today we are going to be doing an update video to the PvP meta analysis for Azur Lane. Welcome back, guys, and happy Martin Luther King Day. For those of you who are interested, today we are going to be taking a look at what has been happening over the last 2 seasons in the month of January for exercises. So here we are looking at the raw usage for ships for the last 2 seasons. And the biggest note is that Hiru has finally been knocked off from her 3rd place spot. Warspite is now the 3rd most used ship, and that was repeated again in this other season. So that is, I guess, one of the biggest notes. In terms of other ships that have jumped on the map, Frederick de Grasse and Azuma, and I think one Seattle have moved on from the PR2 seasons into valid fleets for PvP. There were a lot of fleets that I threw out for not being valid in this data, and a lot of them had those 2 ships, Frederick de Grasse and Azuma, but the ships that I kept here are ships that I would deem viable. Now, no one in the game has Frederick de Grasse or Azuma at Limit Break 3, so none of them have them completely done. Frederick de Grasse does not have her main gun +1, which is going to be nuts when it does hit. Potential tier 0 ship. But even without being fully completely done, a lot of people do have them up to Limit Break 1 or 4 stars and level 120 and Oathed and all their skills maxed out with +10 gold gears. They become viable, especially Frederick, who deals a lot of damage with that barrage, which you can level up to level 10 without limit breaking at all. So those ships can be usable in PvP at this point, although they will get significantly better as more people can get blueprints. Other ships that have jumped into the races, Belfast is kind of taking the lead. Jinsu did not go away in this last season, but Belfast is looking like the 3rd ship to be added to the Yukikaze Juno lineup. St. Louis has dropped a little bit recently, which I don't understand that because I am a big fan of St. Louis in the Vanguard. I think she's like an evasion tank that just deals a lot of damage, but Anami is still pretty relevant. Took a big jump now that people are going to have to start dealing with Azuma tanks. Speaking of dealing with Azuma tanks, Noshiro joins the game. We see Noshiro finally get in there. A lot of people are still leveling her up, so not too many cases, but we do see a rise in Ibuki, who usually gets paired with Noshiro and will be very relevant for dealing with Azuma when she is widely used. Shirakami Fubuki from the event with the Hololive event has been relevant for the last 2 seasons. I'm not exactly sure. I guess she does deal all of her damage pretty much in torpedoes and aviation, which both have good modifiers against Azuma. That also just might be, some people fangirling her. That's pretty much kind of what I get at the takeaway from here. So if we go look at our pivot table here for the most recent season, we see that pretty clearly the most common fleet used is Belfast, Juno, Yukikaze, and the second most common fleet is going to be Jinsu, Ainami, Yukikaze, so that torpedo fleet that we have going there. If we look over at the main fleet, and we look at the choices for Namagi, we see that Hiru or Namagiru is still the most common fleet, but has lost a significant amount of ground to Namagi Warspite, which almost close to 50-50 now. And that's kind of interesting because Namagiru is the most consistent fleet, but Namagi Warspite kind of counters it a little bit. We see a Frederick de Grasse there. I only imagine that to go up as time passes. A little throwback for Hyuga, who used to be the top choice before Hiru got her retrofit. And then Enterprise and Formidable, just great ships thrown everywhere. So we can go look at now the heat map. Now we're going to look at the heat map for not this last season, but the 2 seasons ago, just because it's a little cleaner for you guys to see and some stuff I want to talk about. But generally, we still see most of the pairs that you'd expect with synergies. Frederick de Grosse, though, we see that we throw her with Namagi, we've thrown her with Enterprise, we've thrown her with Bismarck, Graf Zeppelin, and Illustrious. That was the interesting one. Illustrious has actually picked up a little bit more than I thought. I guess she is a great choice for Chapter 13, and maybe people are just trying to level her, so that very possible that that's the case of why Illustrious has seen a slight uptick. But, she also has some relevance in keeping the Vanguard alive and dealing with heavy aviation opponents. We, try to look at what ships we're using Aurora in. We're still using her in a lot of the Hiru fleets. In terms of some of the Vanguard ships, we see that basically Yuki and Juno are thrown in everything, and there's a good mix, and it just kind of scales across. We see that Sendai is pretty much only used with Akaga fleets, are primarily used with Akaga fleets. And we see Baltimore goes with Enterprise. So a lot of things in the heat map are going to be kind of things that you'd expect from synergies, but they just kind of confirm that with the data there. So now if we go into the meta breakdown, we're going to go into the pie chart here of this most recent season. And if you can see, it's a lot more colorful. And that's because I've added 2 more categories. The other category has continued to grow, and it was bothering me. So I've broken it down and added 2 more categories. The first one is the Waryu category. This category is not going away. It's a good fleet. Any fleet that is not already given a category, so it would have been placed in other, and then has Warspite and Hero in it. So something like a Warspite Hero Nagato is a good example of what would be in this category. Something like a Monarch Warspite Hero is actually still going to be classified in the HMS backline. And this fleet, I did another PvP video on it, so you can go check that out if you want to learn how to build it. But this fleet is just going to stick around because it's the counter hero. I'm going to deal with your hero before you can deal with mine, and hopefully that works. So this fleet did not exist when I started doing these meta-analysis videos, so that's why I didn't have a specific section for them, but it's very clearly going to stay, so we added that. And then the second section that we added was the minor factions. So there are many minor factions. There are the Chinese faction, the Russian faction, the Italian, and the French factions. And so these factions typically don't have enough ships to be relevant, but Jean Bart and Littorio are frequent rogue options for people. And when they are thrown into ships, it kind of usually messes up categorization. They're thrown Enterprise Warspite, Jean Bart is something that would be used, and that doesn't get categorized as anything. And so there's always a few of them. It always hovers around 5%, which is not significant, but it is notable. And the reason I didn't opt to put them in the first place was because there is really no synergy. It is an other, just throw your random best ships together. But the reason I ended up opting to put them in now is because there's potential that the French or Italian navies will become relevant in the future when they get more support. A lot of people forget this, but in World War II, French Navy was actually really powerful, but Germany just took them out by land really quick, and then they ended up destroying most of their navy to prevent it from being captured. So it really didn't get seen in too much action, but potentially we do get a lot more added French ships as they start to run out of KMS ships and other faction ships. It probably won't run out of US ships, to be honest, but some of the other factions, they might start to dwindle there. And they were really powerful. Just look at something like St. Louis or Jean Bart. They're already pretty powerful ships in game. So there's potential that we get a lot more powerful French ships. And then the Italian ships, the Italian Navy at that point in time was pretty powerful. It was small in numbers, but the actual ships themselves were pretty powerful. They had pretty up-to-date battleships at the time. No carriers, though, and they didn't like to fight at night. But we also know that Pola and Vittorio Veneto, their files are already in the game. They've been spoiled in the event dialogue. We know what their images look like. So at some point they're going to be in the game. Maybe it's a rerun of the Italian event, maybe it's their own event. They're going to come into the game, and if Pola gets a good skill and has Zara's stats, and Vittorio Veneto gets Littorio's stats, and then like flagship boost / barrage skill, like something like a Nagato or a Bismarck, like the other Crimson factions have, then you could potentially see the Italian Navy do well. So I threw all of the minor factions, and so this would just be if you don't fit into any other category and you have any minor faction ship in the main fleet, then you get thrown in this category. As of right now, the only 2 ships that are relevant would be Littorio or Jean Bart. So we made it a little bit more colorful. So we'll take a look at that. So we obviously have Namagi still ruling the waves, but note that if we were to break this down into how many were Namagi Warspite and how many were Namagi Ru, we'd see Namagi Ru diminishing its strong grip on the top fleet. Then we see Akaga fleets still hanging in there, but definitely decreased since the release of Warspite, and obviously the strength of Hiru's retrofit as well. We see the Bunny fleet come back for this week for this season after a 3-season drought. It's, like I said, still a tier 2 fleet, so it'll be around every once in a while. Couple people will run it. We don't see a Swan fleet come back, so they are now officially on a 3-week drought. Queen Elizabeth hangs around. I don't think there is any season where she doesn't at least have a few people running her, and she's very friendly to new players to get, but I would probably put her at tier 2 as well. HMS backline takes a hit here as people just start to do random things. If we take a look at the previous section in the previous season ending on January 5th, we see that they were up to 20% of fleets were running like HMS backline. Some of the common ships for that is obviously Centaur, Formidable, Warspite, Monarch. Those are like your choices basically. We see that the USS carrier fleets kind of come back a little bit, not as strong, but USS carrier fleets are pretty good. They're better in PvE than PvP, but they're still like Enterprise is still very solid ship. And then the USS battleships, they are not very good, but there was one person who was able to get into the top 100, not this last season, but the season before that. So they are still on the map, and maybe when we get Iowa, we move in. KMS always has some fangirls that always will play KMS, and with Frederick de Grosse, this can only get better when they like Bismarck plus Frederick de Grosse is actually very solid. And then our other category continues to grow. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to break out the Waryu and the minor fleet factions. So if we look at the time graph here, we start to see a little bit more relevant data here. We see Namagi kind of stabilizing in between that 40-50% range there. We see the second one most clearly being HMS and Kaga being the third best fleet. That's kind of the define there. And then we get into this jumble junk. Waryu and USS carriers tend to be decent. The minor factions are around. Jean Bart is a very popular ship. And everything else kind of jumbles in and out. We see different fleets coming from going to 0, going to a couple percent, whatnot. That's all kind of tier 3 stuff. So that's all we're looking at here. Anything I'm looking at in the future, like I said, Frederick de Grosse, when people can use her with her main gun +1, is going to be nuts. Azuma is also going to be a really powerful ship. There are counters to Azuma, so because there are counters to Azuma, I don't think she'll be a tier 0 potential ship. She's going to be tier 1. She's just so tanky. She's going to be great for PvE, except maybe Chapter 13. I don't think she'll help you for that, but she'll be great for EX modes. She'll be great for challenge modes. She'll pretty much be great for every chapter up to 11, usable for chapter 12. And in PvP, she'll be a tier 1 ship, but there's like no counters to a Frederick de Grosse with a +1 gun. Like other than herself, like you have to counter it with your own Frederick de Grosse. And it's because it's just so much damage that she's dealing and just so powerful. I mean, I don't even know. She's like 9,000, almost 10,000 HP. She's got a barrage that's going to be striking every like 15 seconds. And then, main gun +1 and 2 really relevant skills. It was kind of going to be like Hiru before Warspite Retrofit came out and there was a counter to Hiru. Like it was like everyone had to play Hiru because there was no counter to it. But now that Warspite's out, you know, it's not necessary to play Hero. Hero is still a very good ship. Like, it's not wrong to play her, but there is a counter to her. That's kind of how I see that Azuma's going to be. She's a very good ship. They're not wrong to play her, but there's going to be counters, so she's not going to be tier 0. Like, you have Jinsu Anami or Ibuki no Shiru, which is my favorite option there. Ibuki no Shiru is gonna delete Azuma's with 4 Oxy torpedoes and a Yukikaze or something like that, and the rainbow magnetic torpedoes, homing torpedoes. Yeah, she has counters, but she is going to be very strong. And so that's all I got for the meta analysis. Stay tuned for another month. This month we did see some PR2 ships, but very limited. Next month I expect to see a few more. I know mine is not viable yet. My PR2 ships are not viable in PvP yet, but in a month I'm hoping that they will be viable. They're probably not going to be limit break 3 in a month. I'm not that aggressive. I'm not even sure. Yeah. But they, like I said, those ships are so powerful that even at not full strength, they are still viable, like tier 2 options in PvP. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoy these update videos and just kind of seeing how the meta changes over time. You know, still planning on doing these once a month. So if you want to subscribe to our channel and get notifications for when these come out, please do. It really does help.